She tied the unhappy dog up again, but do you think Nana ceased to bark? Bring Master and Mrs. home from the party. Why, that was just what she wanted. Do you think she cared whether she was whipped so long as her charges were safe? Unfortunately, Lisa returned to her puddings, and Nana, seeing that no help would come from her, strained and strained at the chain until at last she broke it. In another moment she had burst into the dining room of 17 and flung up her paws to heaven, her most expressive way of making a communication. Mr. and Mrs. Darling knew at once that something terrible was happening in their nursery, and without a good-bye to their hostess they rushed into the street. But it was now 10 minutes since 3 scoundrels had been breathing behind the curtains, and Peter Pan can do a great deal in 10 minutes. We now returned to the nursery. "It's all right," John announced, emerging from his hiding place. "I say, Peter can really fly." Instead of troubling to answer him, Peter flew round the room, taking the mantelpiece on the way. "How topping," said John and Michael. "How sweet," cried Wendy. "Yes, I'm sweet, oh I'm sweet," said Peter, forgetting his manners again. It looked delightfully easy, and they tried it first from the floor, and then from the beds, but they always went down instead of up. "I say, how do you do it?" asked John, rubbing his knee. He was quite a practical boy. "You just think lovely, wonderful thoughts," Peter explained, "and they lift you up in the air." He showed them again. "You're so nippy at it," John said. "Couldn't you do it very slowly once?" Peter did it both slowly and quickly. "I've got it now, Wendy," cried John, but soon he found he had not. No one of them could fly an inch, though even Michael wasn't words of 2 syllables, and Peter did not know A from Z. Of course, Peter had been trifling with them, for no one can fly unless the fairy dust had been blown on them. Fortunately, as we have mentioned, one of his hands was messy with it, and he blew some on each of them, with the most superb results. "Now, just wiggle your shoulders this way," he said, "and let go." They were all on their beds and gallant. Michael let go first. He did not quite mean to let go, but he did it, and immediately he was borne across the room. "I flew," he screamed while still in midair. John let go and met Wendy near the bathroom. "Oh, lovely! Oh, ripping! Look at me! Look at me! Look at me!" They were not nearly so elegant as Peter. They could not help kicking a little, but their heads were bobbing against the ceiling, and there is almost nothing so delicious as that. Peter gave Wendy a hand at first, but had to desist. Tink was so indignant. Up and down they went, and round. Heavenly was Wendy's word. "I say," cried John, "why shouldn't we all go out?" Of course it was to this that Peter had been luring them. Michael was ready. He wanted to see how long it took him to do 1,000,000,000 miles. But Wendy hesitated. "Mermaids," said Peter again. "Oh, and there are pirates." "Pirates!" cried John, seizing his Sunday hat. "Let us go at once." It was just at this moment that Mr. and Mrs. Darling hurried with Nana out of 17. They ran into the middle of the street to look up at the nursery window, and yes, it was still shut, but the room was ablaze with light, and a most heart-gripping sight of all. They could see in shadow on the curtain 3 little figures in night attire circling round and round, not on the floor but in the air. Not 3 figures, 4. In a tremble they opened the street door. Mr. Darling would have rushed upstairs, but Miss Darling signed to him to go softly. She even tried to make her heart go softly. Will they reach the nursery in time? If so, how delightful for them, and we shall all breathe a sigh of relief, but there will be no story. On the other hand, if they are not in time, I solemnly promise that it will all come right in the end. They would have reached the nursery in time had it not been that a little star were watching them. Once again the stars blew the window open, and the smallest star of all called out, "Cave, Peter." Peter knew that there was not a moment to lose. "Come," he cried imperiously, and soared out at once into the night, followed by John and Michael and Wendy. Mr. and Mrs. Darling and Nana rushed into the nursery. Too late, the birds were flown.